Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I am so excited to be back. I just wrapped up Project Bollywood 2025. For those of you who don't know, that's my Bollywood dance production. We had 115 dancers, and for the past 6 to 7 months, I have been immersed in creating Project Bollywood. Project Bollywood used to be a show I used to do pre-pandemic, and we used to do them every year. And a production of this scale is all consuming. And as the creative director, I was involved in choreographing the concept of the show, the costume designing, lighting, set and fly rail design, all things auditorium and stage management, and just the sheer volume of 115 dancers and organizing this and making sure every piece on stage was different and unique. And we did the best we could. And I am so excited to say that the show was such a massive success and we outdid all our previous shows. In fact, after the pandemic, I had stopped doing these shows and instead the Let's Talk Yoga podcast was born. But my wonderful students at Bollyworks chased me quite literally for the past 4.5 years to bring back Project Bollywood because it is one of those shows in the local area. You will not see a Bollywood show like this. It is one of the most professional, exciting, hard-hitting productions that we have for Bollywood. So when we opened up ticket sales for this show, the entire auditorium sold out in like under 20 minutes. And we had the auditorium was huge. We had a capacity of about 700 seats. And in less than 20 minutes, all seats were gone. That's how anticipated this production was. And I have always been very quiet and I used to downplay how much people want my Bollywood side. And I don't know why I do that. It's something I am exploring. It is something I am very aware of. But for the first time in so long, I have leaned into it. And if I'm being very honest with you, I'm in a state of flow. When it comes to all things dance and production and creation, nothing makes me happier. And I just go into this state of flow where it feels like a living meditation in many ways. And it's all consuming in the most beautiful way. And I love it. And while it's extremely stressful, especially this time, because we had some unprecedented challenges beyond our control. And it just consumed me in so many ways. And there were many tense moments. We navigated through them. I'm not going to go into those at this point, but I'm always in a state of flow. And I was looking forward to being done. That dance is a different kind of high. And if you want to see, our finale performance is on our Bollyworks YouTube channel. I will link it in the show notes if you want to give that a watch. We haven't made the whole show public. We have made a couple of performances public, and you will see one finale where all 115 dancers take to stage. And Bollywood is just something so special and so close to my heart. And it reminds me of my years as a professional Bollywood dancer, being in auditoriums, managing shows, traveling the world. So it was a beautiful experience. It was also a very stressful one. And we're finally done. And I am back to all things yoga. I have missed doing this for you. In my head, I have been planning conversations and topics for the podcast. And I am so happy to finally be back to all things yoga. I hope you are doing well. In today's episode, I am diving into some summer sequencing tips and ideas for your classes. So as usual, grab a cup of maybe some iced tea and let's do this. Hi everyone, I'm Arundhati and you've just tuned in to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast, your ultimate online destination for learning about yoga. Whether you're a seasoned yoga teacher or a curious yoga student, there's something for you here. Let this podcast be your virtual yoga school. We offer insights, inspiration, and loads of nerdy exploration of yoga along the way. But first, who am I? I'm an Indian immigrant yoga teacher living in America for the past decade. I have my own yoga school here in Seattle, and I'm also a Bollywood choreographer, and I've nurtured a thriving yoga community at my studio, as well as a global yoga audience through my courses and this podcast. Through this podcast, I intend to create a space for you, the yoga student and yoga teacher, to learn about yoga in depth.
Think of this as your online yoga school, free teacher training coming to you every week. So grab your cup of chai and let's jump in.
Summer in Seattle is really wonderful. If you've never been to Seattle, you should come sometime during summer. We have so many things to do here, but we don't get sunshine all year round. So when we do, usually during the summer months, people go crazy. The 2 or 2.5 months of sunshine and warmth that we have, people spend time outdoors. We have so many hikes and lakes and mountains. There's so much to do. So usually nobody wants to be indoors and studios empty out. Gyms, fitness clubs, all of them, you will notice that they get a lot slimmer during summer. And if you have a studio like mine with a huge immigrant audience, a lot of them during this summer school break will go back to their country of origin to visit family and friends. But every summer, I have a summer protocol when it comes to sequencing, and I would love to share these with you today. I'm sharing 3 sequencing tips to keep in mind, especially during summer or if it gets really warm where you are. These 3 tips are effective, time tested, and really easy to implement in your classes. So grab your pen and paper and let's get to it. The first sequencing tip I would give you for summer is to teach cooling yoga poses in your classes. Sometimes, at least in my studio, people avoid coming to class because they are overheated. They've spent a lot of time in the sun, and it's not something we're used to because we spend 9 or 10 months without the sun. So we get pretty burnt out by the sun quickly. So summer is a great time in yoga classes to introduce a new way of practice and teaching yourself and your students to adapt to external changes in the environment. When you look at a yoga pose, it has a specific guna or nature. That is, a yoga pose can be heating, cooling, or neutral. Again, a yoga pose has a specific nature, a specific guna, and that can be heating, cooling, or neutral. The most common question I get from yoga teachers is there a yoga book where they can find the list of yoga poses and their gunas? The answer is no. There isn't one resource like that. In many ways, this is generational yoga wisdom that is passed on from teachers to students in classes. And this is something I learned in my yoga shala days when I was still living in India and going to yoga classes. But I do recognize that this heating, cooling, and neutral quality of poses is not something that is taught commonly and often in Western yoga teacher trainings. So I will do my best to explain it to you in under 30 seconds. Understanding this is relatively easy if you put some thought into it. Some poses are naturally heating to the body and will be a little more demanding, whereas other poses are cooling to the body. Literally, in body temperature, you will feel cooler in some poses and warmer in others. And while there is a third category that is more neutral, I will talk about that later. The best way to understand this is to give you examples. So let's play a quick yoga quiz game right here. I'm going to name a few poses, and I want you to think of, if you had to put these in 3 different buckets, would you put it in the heating category, the cooling category, or the neutral category? Does that make sense? Okay, so let's go. So the first pose I want you to think of is Urdhva Mukha Shwanasana, upward facing dog. Do you think this is heating, cooling, or neutral? Just the first thing that comes to your mind. That is your answer. Next, Virabhadrasana 2, Warrior 2. Another pose for you to consider, Virabhadrasana 3, Warrior 3. And then lastly, Urdhva Dhanurasana, full wheel pose. If you guessed heating for all these poses, then you are correct. Usually, back bends and most upright single leg balancing poses are considered to be more heating. Many standing poses are also heating. I'm going to say that again. Usually back bends, upright single leg balance poses, and many standing poses are heating. Now, let's explore a few other poses. Asana. Standing, forward, fold. Do you think it is cooling, heating or neutral. Adho Mukha Shwanasana, downward facing dog pose. What about Ardha Padma Uttanasana, half lotus standing forward bent? Let's take another one. Prasarita Padottanasana, wide leg standing forward bent. And one last one here. Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose. If you guessed cooling for all these poses, then you are right. Usually, most forward bending poses, whether it is seated or standing, has a cooling quality to it because the head is below the heart. And then there are neutral poses. These are poses that are neither heating nor cooling. They're kind of in the middle. And usually all twisting poses, especially seated twisting poses and supine or lying down twisting poses, are neutral in nature. There's a little more nuance to this. And if you are in any of my courses later this year, we will get into this in more detail when we understand sequencing. But I'm hoping this quick recap gives you some amount of understanding of the gunas or the nature of these poses. So in your summer class plans, make sure to include more cooling poses. You can use these cooling poses in 3 different ways. Okay, make sure you hear me on these because these 3 tips are very effective. And whether you are a new teacher or an experienced teacher, this will add so much value to your classes. The first summer sequencing tip is to add a cooling pose after 3 or 4 heating poses. Again, to add 1 cooling pose after about 3 or 4 heating poses. Let me give you an example. Say you're doing a few standing poses like Trikonasana, Parshvakonasana, Virabhadrasana 2. Okay, so triangle, side angle, and warrior 2. After you finish this on both sides, you add a wide leg standing forward bend and you stay there for a good 5 to 10 breaths. And this is a cooling pose because it's a forward extension, it's a forward bend, the head is below the heart. And once you stay here, it takes the heat and slowly moves a student towards feeling a little cooler in their body temperature. You can do this once, you can do this twice. Another good example would be, say, if you are flowing between low lunge Anjaneyasana and Prishtasana, lizard pose. You could add Adho Mukha Shwanasana, downward facing dog, for about 4 to 8 breaths and let people stay in that because down dog is a cooling pose. It's also a grounding pose, but it is a very cooling pose. So remember, a solid way of approaching summer sequences is to add a cooling pose between, say, 3 to 5 heating poses. The second tip I have for you here is a little more nuanced and perhaps needs a little more skill and thought before you craft the sequence. And if you are a new yoga teacher, you want to be a little patient with this. Here, you would build an entire class plan, an entire sequence where the focus is mainly on seated forward extension type of poses. You would essentially strip down and remove heating poses, and you would need to back off from a very one breath, one movement vinyasa type of sequencing. Peak pose sequencing. And I hope you have heard some of my episodes about peak pose sequencing in the past. Peak pose sequencing lends itself beautifully to this one. It's a little hard for me to explain this particular approach where you have to build an entire class plan with cooling poses in mind and taking people to a beautiful peak pose that is cooling in nature instead of heating. Someday, when you and I are in a live sequencing course, and hopefully that will be later this year, I will walk you through some of these sequences so you can experience this live for yourself. But what I want you to know is that when you are looking to create a more cooling sequence, you do not need to go heavy on vinyasa because vinyasa is heating. You could reduce all the chaturanga, up dog, down dogs, and you could move from pose to pose And when you move from pose to pose, you add more cooling sequences. And if you are comfortable with the peak pose sequencing, then this would be a wonderful one for that. If not, spend a little more time on the first tip I gave you and then pay more attention to the next one that's coming up. A third tip here, this is the easiest of them all. I call it the 70-30 sequencing tip. Continue to offer what you are already doing. Don't change anything, but take the last 15 to 20 minutes of class and make it a cooling practice. This would entail you adding more seated poses, more supine poses, cooling pranayama practices, and longer shavasanas. Does that make sense? So you've done, say, the first 45 minutes of class, just like you typically would. And then the last 15 to 20 minutes of your class, you take that and make students do seated poses, forward extensions, lying down supine poses, cooling pranayama practices, and longer shavasanas. This will make sure your student goes from heating to neutral to cooling. And it's a wonderful way of getting comfortable with understanding the gunas of a yoga pose. This way, students are not overheated, they are not dehydrated, and it is a nice way of you stepping into this approach towards sequencing. Okay, so I would highly recommend that you start here with tip 3, where you do the 70-30 divide. Then you go to the first tip, where you learn to add a cooling pose after, say, 3 to 5 heating poses. And for the more experienced teachers here, you would craft a full sequencing plan that is largely focused on cooling peak pose. And the entire class is a little not heavy on vinyasa, but that's more for an experienced yoga teacher. So those are my 3 tips for you today when it comes to sequencing your classes during summer. If you enjoy these type of short, quick episodes and you would like to hear a little more summer yoga content, then make sure you find me on Instagram. I'm at Arundhati Baitmangalkar. Just DM me and say more summer podcast episodes. It feels great to be back. I have such wonderful conversations lined up with guests for you later this summer. I cannot wait to bring you all of that. I did take a break from my newsletter last month. I haven't sent that out, but make sure you are signed up for my newsletter, because in this next version that goes out after this episode drops, I will be sending out a list of cooling yoga poses to include in your summer yoga classes. And I would not want you to miss that. It will go out once to my newsletter list as soon as this episode drops. That's it from me, my friend. I hope you are doing well. Please remember that if you have found some value in these podcasts, please review it, rate it, and share it with at least one yoga friend. And that will be the biggest support you can give this. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you again next week. Until then, enjoy your practice. Take care. Bye-bye.